Why no contact hits avoidance later, but anxious people first. No contact doesn't hurt everyone at the same time, and that's what makes it so confusing. For anxious people, the pain arrives immediately, like an emotional shock wave the moment communication stops. For avoidance, the impact is delayed. Sometimes it takes weeks, sometimes months, and when it finally hits, it often hits quietly, internally, and unexpectedly. This difference isn't about who loved more or who cared less. It's about how different attachment systems process loss, threat, and emotional regulation on completely different timelines. When no contact begins, the anxious nervous system reacts first. Silence feels dangerous. It triggers a deep fear of abandonment, rejection, and being replaced. The anxious mind immediately tries to restore connection, replaying conversations, analyzing mistakes, imagining worst-case scenarios. The urge to reach out feels urgent, almost physical. This isn't weakness, it's biology. Anxious attachment is wired to regulate emotions through closeness, reassurance, and responsiveness. When that regulation is suddenly removed, the system goes into alarm mode. That's why the early days of no contact are often the hardest for anxious people. The pain is intense, raw, and overwhelming. They don't just miss the person, they miss certainty. Their mind asks questions it can't answer. Are they okay? Do they miss me? Did I ever matter? This uncertainty is torture for an anxious system. Silence doesn't feel neutral. It feels like abandonment in real time. Avoidants experience the beginning of no contact very differently. Instead of panic, they often feel relief. The pressure is gone. The emotional expectations disappear. There's no one asking for closeness, consistency, or vulnerability. Their nervous system, which associates intimacy with loss of autonomy or emotional overwhelm, finally gets space. And that space feels calming. At first, this is where most misunderstandings are born. From the outside, it looks like the avoidant doesn't care. They seem fine, distracted, functional, sometimes even happier. But what's really happening isn't indifference. It's deactivation. Avoidants cope with relational stress by suppressing emotions, not processing them. Their system has learned, if I shut feelings down, I stay safe. So when no contact starts, avoidants don't feel the loss immediately. They delay it. They distract themselves with work, routines, gym sessions, social plans, or new interests. They tell themselves the relationship wasn't right anyway. This isn't manipulation or cruelty. It's a protective survival pattern learned early in life. But here's the critical truth. Suppression is not healing. Avoidants don't eliminate emotions. They postpone them. And postponed emotions don't disappear. They accumulate quietly beneath the surface. While the anxious person is feeling everything up front, the avoidant is emotionally coasting. But emotional debt always comes due. As days turn into weeks, something subtle begins to shift for the avoidant. The distractions lose their intensity. Quiet moments become longer. A song triggers a memory. A place brings a sudden sense of absence. At first they brush it off, but the longer no contact lasts, the fewer ways they have to avoid their internal experience. This is when no contact starts hitting avoidance, not as panic, but as absence. Avoidants don't usually miss the relationship first. They miss the emotional safety it quietly provided. They begin to notice what's no longer there. Someone who understood them, grounded them, or made life feel more anchored. And because avoidants pride themselves on independence, this realization is deeply uncomfortable. They don't label it heartbreak. They feel restless, unsettled, nostalgic, or strangely empty. This delayed reaction is why avoidants often reach out of nowhere. To the anxious person, it feels unfair or confusing. Why now when I'm finally getting stronger? But from the avoidance internal timeline, this is the moment the loss finally landed. The reason no contact affects each attachment style differently is because they regulate emotions in opposite directions. Anxious people regulate externally, through closeness and reassurance. Avoidants regulate internally, through distance and control. No contact removes external regulation, so anxious people feel the pain immediately. But it also removes suppression opportunities, so avoidants feel it later. Silence also means different things to each attachment system. To an anxious person, silence means rejection. To an avoidant, silence initially means relief. But over time, that same silence becomes disconnection, especially when the anxious person truly stops chasing. When the avoidant realizes the door isn't just temporarily quiet, but possibly closing for real, their system experiences something unfamiliar: emotional vulnerability without control. This is why anxious people often heal faster than avoidants when no contact is maintained. Once the anxious person survives the initial emotional storm, something powerful happens. Their nervous system slowly re-regulates. They learn to self-soothe. Their identity expands beyond the relationship. The pain that once screamed becomes quieter. And eventually they realize something deeply empowering. I survived this. Avoidants, on the other hand, often struggle later because they skipped emotional processing. When feelings finally surface, they don't have the tools to sit with them. They feel longing without knowing how to express it, regret without knowing how to repair, fear without knowing how to ask for reassurance. This is why avoidants often engage indirectly, checking social media, sending vague messages, testing the waters, rather than communicating clearly. No contact is not punishment, it's a mirror. For anxious people, it reflects their fear of abandonment and teaches self-trust. For avoidance, it reflects their fear of intimacy and teaches emotional accountability. Each person is forced to face what they've been avoiding, just on different timelines. This is also why chasing an avoidant delays their emotional growth. When the anxious person keeps reaching out, the avoidant never fully feels the loss. Their system stays in relief mode. No contact removes that buffer and allows natural consequences to emerge, not as revenge, but as reality. Over time, something interesting happens. The power dynamic shifts. The anxious person becomes calmer, grounded and discerning. The avoidant becomes curious, reflective, sometimes even insecure. Not because roles reversed, but because emotional balance is being restored. Here's the truth most people miss. Avoidants don't come back because they miss being chased. They come back when they feel the absence of someone who chose self-respect over pursuit. That's why no contact hits them later, but deeper. And one final point that matters more than anything. An avoidant reaching out does not automatically mean they've healed. Awareness is not transformation. No contact reveals feelings. But real change requires emotional work, communication, and accountability. If you're anxious and hurting early, understand this. Your pain does not mean you cared more. It means you felt sooner, and feeling sooner often means healing sooner. If you're avoidant and feeling the weight later, it doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you didn't feel safe enough to feel at the time. No contact isn't about who breaks first, it's about who grows. And if you're in the silence right now, remember this. What feels unbearable today may be building strength you'll be grateful for tomorrow. And what feels like relief for them now may become clarity they can't escape later. Stay grounded. Stay self-respecting. Let no contact do what it's meant to do. Not force someone back, but bring everyone closer to emotional truth.